Well, hello again, everybody. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by 101 CBD. Now, I'm sure that for most of us, our stress and anxiety level has really gone up the last couple of days. At least it has for me anyways. And one of the things I truly do believe that's helping me deal with this stress that's been going on is my daily use of CBD oil. I use 101 CBD's Chill X Raw CBD Oil Blend. I take it twice a day, once in the afternoon and once right before bed. Now, not only do I get the calming properties of the raw CBD, that's CBDA, but it's also blended with high-quality organic passion flower, which helps accentuate that chill factor and really helps my overall relaxation. And a couple of really important things I want you to know is that it helps me relax without making me feel drowsy and without making me feel high, which is really important to me. And it also comes in their tasty award-winning blueberry flavor. And right now, 101 CBD has free shipping on all orders over $25. They have same-day delivery service in Ojai and Ventura. And you can get a free CBD hand sanitizer with orders over $47. So go over to 101cbd.org and pick up some raw CBD oil. And don't forget to use coupon code IMGS25 to get 25% off of that order. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Green Code Digital Marketing. Because when you have a cannabis brand or a business, you know that your digital presence is an important part of marketing today. And if you're doing it yourself, it takes a lot of time away from focusing on your business. That's why you need to talk to the professionals at Green Code Digital Marketing, because they can help optimize your website and digital presence for the highest visibility. Go to greencode.website and see how they can help you build your brand. Okay, now let's start the show. Well, brothers and sisters, welcome back. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. I'm your host, Alex. Later on, I will play a conversation that I recorded with Dr. Jake Felice. He came back on the show to answer some more medical questions for us. But before that, I just want to check in with everybody, man. I'm hoping everyone's all right. I hope everyone's having an okay time being, stuck at home, locked inside. It's a pretty crazy time out there, man. I really didn't expect this to happen. I wouldn't have imagined this to happen. What a trip. COVID-19 came on the scene and basically shut everything down. And I really do think that this is going to change the way we do a lot of things. For example, just like education and entertainment. On the education side, I know a bunch of colleges got shut down. I know my, schools got shut down. Which is making us have this really interesting conversation about, how we educate. Because for example, like my daughter's middle school, all of their classes got shifted online. And starting as of Monday for probably the next 6 weeks, if not for the rest of the school year, it looks like they may wind up doing all of their classes online. And the same thing goes with colleges too. A bunch of colleges, if not, mostly all of them or all of them around the country seem to have shut down also and said, okay, we're moving everything online. Once after spring break is over, they, as far as what I've heard, they don't want any students coming back on campus, which is a really interesting thing because now we have to talk about, well, okay, so then how hard is it to get higher education online? Because it seems like for a long time, colleges didn't really want to, look too deeply into the idea of putting all of their classes online. And that probably had a lot to do with the fact that would really cut into how much they could charge for more education, for higher education. And actually, how hard is it to educate that way? It seems like we're about to find out. And something else that I was thinking about was like entertainment-wise, like how we get our content, how we consume our entertainment and make entertainment for people. And get that in front of people, that's really going to change. I spoke to a couple of people this past week who said they were going to launch their own podcast, and which makes sense. You've got a whole, population of people stuck inside who, we all have our story to tell. We all want to tell our story, and it's really easy nowadays to really put out content on because of technology. It's really easy to put out a podcast. I think there's a couple of apps that you can use on your phone to put a podcast out. So that's going to be kind of a trippy thing to see, because I think right now there's something like 800,000, 900,000 active podcasts in the world, and something like 7.5 billion people. So you break that down, it's about, I don't know, man, something like a little over 8,000. Like, there's one podcast for every 8,000 people. And I think after this isolating everybody for coronavirus, I think there's going to be maybe twice as many podcasts out. Who knows, man? It's just going to be a trip. And yet another thing I was thinking about as far as how this is going to change the way we do things is, like, this could very well change the way we assemble and even protest. And I'm going to give you something to worry about, as if you didn't have enough things to worry about. But yeah, I mean, how easy is it going to be for the government to cancel protests, or to come in and break a protest up by saying, no, we don't want you to do it, or you can't do it because we're afraid of a coronavirus outbreak or some other disease outbreak? It's one of those things we're going to have to pay attention to as American citizens, as citizens of any country, really. But one of the bright sides to all this, and the way I see it, is, you really do see a lot more families hanging out. Me and my family, we really like to hike, and, I'll take my daughter out to some of the really easier trails around here, and, everybody's out with their kids, which is awesome. I love it, It's kind of like, aside from the stress of not going to work and having all that uncertainty, just seeing people hanging out like it's a holiday, but not really. And don't forget, you guys, check in on those older neighbors that you may know, or your older relatives. Some people may not have family close to them, and they're probably just as scared of the uncertainty as we are, because the media, that's all they're doing, it seems like, is really just stoking this fear. And like I was saying, I'm sure they're under a lot of stress too, of a lot of uncertainty, and maybe they don't need anything from you. Maybe they just need some time and want to talk to you and just be heard. Maybe they don't need you to go to the grocery store for them. But either way, I think, make yourself available. Go over there, knock on their door, make sure they know that, they're being thought of. They're not being forgotten. Now, let's talk a little bit about the cannabis side of this. As far as I know, most dispensaries are open. You should call your local dispensary and see what kind of changes they have in their hours or how they're operating. Because as far as I know, especially in California, they've been deemed necessary, so people should be there. But, like I said, call your local dispensary, the one you like to go to, just to see what's going on. I know here locally in Ojai, Sespe Creek Collective, they're doing curbside service and delivery. And call them for their delivery routes, and they're going to be open from 10 to 4. And Ojai Greens, another dispensary up here in Ojai, they are open to the public. They do walk-ins, but they are limiting the number of people in store just to make sure they're keeping that social distancing kind of idea going. But call them just to see like how they're doing it. It says they're going to be open from 10 to 7, and they are not doing delivery. And with all this craziness and uncertainty and people panicking, I'm really glad I know how to garden and I know how to grow, not just cannabis, but other vegetables. Because it's like my wife keeps telling me, and I truly do believe, it's really who you know that's going to help you get through this a lot easier. We're lucky in the sense that we live in a smaller community. Like the big chain stores at one point ran out of eggs, but we knew several people who would like raise their own chickens, so they had eggs to exchange for us. My wife exchanged some herbs and we got some eggs. So yeah, it's really about who you know that's going to help you relieve the stress of what's going on out there, man. So if you have a chance, if you can, start gardening. Even if you, like, let's say if you live in a small apartment, put some dirt in some pots and, start growing some herbs, or I don't know, some carrots or something. Because aside from growing the things that you use, it's also, to me, it's also really therapeutic. Just kind of slow down and just help something grow, water it and, just take care of it. So if you can, fucking start a little garden. Speaking of which, this past week, in case you didn't notice, spring started. It's time for us to get those seeds in the ground, man. What are you guys growing? What's your starting lineup? Like for me, I'm growing some genetics from Uncle John's Farms Genetics. I've got the Afghan Durban going in. I've got the Great Rift Valley and the Nepal Diesel. I'm cracking 3 seeds of each. I've got them in a cup of water. They've been in there about a day. I may put them in the soil today. I may wait another day. It all depends on how today goes, really. But go over to at Lorax315 on Instagram to find out what Lorax is doing, because he's the one who developed these genetics for Uncle John's farms. And he was telling me that the Great Rift Valley loves the magnesium and the Nepal is going to love the phosphorus. Thanks a lot, Lorax. I'll be hitting you up for more tips on those, man. All right. Now, let's get to the strain of the week, and it is going to be the diesel cake, which is a cross between the sour diesel and the wedding cake. The wedding cake is also known as the birthday cake or the pink cookies, according to the interwebs. Now, this was a pre-roll that I got from Autumn Brands that I smoked with Rodney last week when we were trying to do our research, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But this was a sativa dominant with about a 20% THC, and since it was a cross of the sour diesel, it did have that nice gassy, fuely smell and the taste. But right at the end, it did have that little sugary flavor of the cake, that nice little kind of sweetness to it. It was pretty cool. I think it's a really great smoke if you're going to hang out with friends. Really, I was really social, really chatty with it. Now, as I said, so remember, me and Rodney, we were going to do some research, get really high and then see if we smoke a CBD joint that would bring us down to like a manageable level. What we tried to do that with this joint. The only problem with that is one joint for 2 potheads. We didn't anticipate that, and we didn't get, at least I didn't get as high as I thought we were going to get, as far as I wanted to get to do this research. And then on top of that, while I was really high, I noticed that Rodney had set up his new recording equipment. Because like I said, he's also starting a podcast. So we started to mess around with that, and we got really distracted and completely forgot to smoke that CBD joint. So much for the research. We're going to have to revisit that again. I think I'm going to have to show up with more than one joint. You know what I think? I think Autumn Brands should sponsor that research for me and Rodney, and we can do it on air on the show. If anybody from Autumn Brands is listening to this, what do you think? Let me know. Or you know what? I'll reach out. We'll put together a scientific... Well, no, I don't think it'd be very scientific, but it'd be a lot of fun. Anyways, I digress. Yes, the diesel cake. Totally great smoke. If you see it out there in the wild, pick it up. Okay, now, a little bit of social media announcements. It seems because of the COVID-19 that if you had a legitimate cannabis event or any other kind of event coming up, that's basically been canceled or it's been moved online. Now, I say legitimate because I know there's a couple of secret sessions that are still going to be happening out there. But even if you're going to those secret sessions, hey man, don't share those joints. Figure out a different way. Everybody gets their own joint, something else. But just take some precautions, Now, for the report from the Cannabis front line, I'm going to read a reminder that Rincon Vitova, the local insectary, sent out. And it says, agriculture is a critical sector where federal guidelines specify that employees who aren't sick can leave home to go to work. For companies in the agricultural and biocontrol industries, the guidelines of critical infrastructure sector include these employees, farm workers, and support service workers to include those who work in field crops, commodity inspections, fuel ethanol facilities, storage facilities, and other agricultural inputs. Employees and companies engaged in the production of chemicals, medicines, vaccines, and other substances used by the food and agricultural industry, including pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, minerals, enrichments, and other agricultural production aids. So in case you didn't realize, America, yes, agricultural workers are deemed essential. Now, you know how just a moment ago I mentioned that things have been moved online? Well, check it out. Rincon Vitova wants to let you know that their nonprofit Dietrich Institute of Applied Insect Ecology is hosting its first webinar on March 31st. It was planned as a local workshop about how to grow healthy citrus, but it was moved online. They will have 9 presenters among 4 roughly 2-hour Zoom webinars from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. The overall content is about how to increase the tree's resistance and protect it from pest and disease. And there is a link in the show notes so you can go and register. I believe it's a free event and spaces are going quickly. So if you're interested, check it out. It's online so everybody can go now. It's not just some regional thing. All right, now coming up next, I'm going to play a conversation that I had with my buddy Dr. Felice. I was lucky enough to get him to get on the phone with me and just have a conversation. We talked a little bit about, COVID-19 and how, CBD oil could help in the fight, just to keep us healthy. He gave me his thoughts about hyperemesis gravidarum, which is just extreme vomiting during pregnancy. He doesn't specialize in pregnancy. He just gave me his thoughts as a physician, really. And we also, revisited and talked again about cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, just vomiting a lot from the use of cannabis, because, we really don't know 100% what's causing it. We have some theories, but there's a lot of different ideas floating around there. So, we just talked about that for a little bit. And don't forget that you can find Dr. Felice at drjakefelice.com. Felice is spelled Felice. All right, hang tight, everybody. I'm going to play a little bit of music, and then I'm going to put that on for you. So, check it out, everybody. I feel really lucky to have with us back on the show Dr. Jake Felice. He was nice enough to take some time and get on the phone with me to answer really some medical questions that we've all kind of been having. Dr. Jake, welcome back to the show, man. Thank you very much.
Alex, thank you. It's really great to be back.
So, man, I got to tell you, brother, let's talk about the elephant in the room, man. I would have never imagined 10 days ago that the world, and even to a more specific point, America, would look like the way it does today, like March 21st. Because, coronavirus came on the scene and, pointed out a lot of things we're not ready for,
Yes, to say the least.
Yeah, so really let's understand, first of all, I mean, a coronavirus, not this specific one, but it's not like we're unfamiliar with versions of a coronavirus.
That is correct. There are a number of other types of coronaviruses. SARS was one of them, with the respiratory syndrome that associated with that, and the common cold is also a coronavirus. But this COVID-19 is a new coronavirus, meaning it's something that is something that we have not encountered before. We do not have a cure. There is no cure. Estimates on vaccine at the very optimal end, I keep hearing 12 to 18 months, may actually end up taking more time. So, and again, like everybody is likely very much aware, what we are focusing on now is reducing spread and flattening the population curve, so to speak. So it's not a question of whether or not people are going to be infected. We know that millions and millions of people are, but it's a question of when. And if everybody gets infected together, it's going to be at the same time. It puts more strain on the system than if it is drawn out over time. So a lot of the public health measures are in, distance separation, social distancing, etc., are designed to reduce that impact and push that curve, so to speak, into the future time, so that we don't have everybody getting sick right away, and that our healthcare system can therefore do a better job at managing some of the severe cases. Some things I think of note. It is now considered, and I don't know why this was ever put out as a public health message, but looking at hospitalization and intensive care unit admission in the U.S. data, not Chinese data, and this data comes from mid-February till about mid-March, so it's no longer brand new. But we see, and I call them kids because I'm a Gen Xer, but the 20-year-old to 44-year-old range, we're actually seeing hospitalization rates in the 15 to 20% range. So so even though this population is not experiencing mortality in anywhere the degree that folks say in their 80s are with this virus, a significant percentage of them are needing hospitalization, are needing ICU admission, and with a limited supply of ventilators is very important for this group, which we really are assets for us because they can be so healthy, is to stay healthy longer, not occupy the hospitals unless it's needed, and also if we do get into a situation like there is in Italy right now, where healthcare providers are having to ration care, and we have 15 ventilators left, and we have 23 people that need to be on ventilators. Who gets the ventilator and who doesn't get the ventilator is a decision that doctors are going to be making on a daily basis in the U.S. That's something that's happening in Italy right now. And if you're 24, 25, you will likely, it is known in Italy that the triage protocols are bumping older folks off of the life-saving equipment in favor for the younger folks, because we know that the younger folks have a higher chance of survival, and that unit of equipment will be used to its greatest ability to save and protect life. So if you are in that age group, one of the reasons it's super helpful for all of us, and me, I'm in my early 50s, is you guys in that group are healthy. Don't clog up the system. So it made me really. I was very upset when I saw the spring break partying happening, because it just. I don't know, Alex, why that upset me so much. It just is that I think that maybe folks aren't seeing the big picture here, that we're all in this together and that we can be of help to people that we don't even know by incorporating good practices. And I know that it's out there in the public messaging, but please just remember to wash your hands. It really is one of the most life-saving things that we can do right now. So anyway, my monologue. Thanks for listening.
Let's talk about that. I think a big reason why spring breakers really don't get it is, one, a lot of them are young people who have this idea of just immortality and invincibility, first of all.
Absolutely.
And then the second, the other thing, I don't know about the second, but the other thing is that since it really hasn't broken out here in this country yet, again, we have this very separated idea of how it can affect people. And we really do need to, or at least I'd like to explain a little more what that means about flattening the curve. Because as you were saying, if everybody gets sick at once, a lot more people are going to die because those resources aren't there for all of the population all of a sudden.
Sure.
You said, you said, most people will get sick. But if we can if we can spread those illnesses out to a nice thin layer to where everybody is able to get resources, it's a lot better than just having this sudden herd immunity. Let's everybody get sick at once, so now we have these antibodies. Yes, that does make sense.
Yes, and that is a proposal. That herd immunity proposal is something that actually British and again, Alex, I am a hemp and cannabis expert. I am not a virologist, I am not an epidemiologist, and I am not on the front lines of this. So I am talking I am a doctor, and I'm talking with as good of a background as I have. So I'm not an expert in this particular area. My understanding is that in England, public health officials were promoting this herd immunity approach, and let's get some folks exposed early so that we have a significant bulk of the population that has some protection against this virus. And they have since revised that, and I'm not sure the exact reasons why that's not working. But I think that one of them is that they saw the current numbers that their healthcare system as well has a high likelihood of potentially being overrun with cases. Now, the other thing that is particularly horrifying is that a lot of the medications aren't getting through. And so in order to put someone on a machine to breathe for you, you need to be intubated, which basically means we need to stick an apparatus in through the mouth and into the breathing, and that area is very sensitive. And normally when we do that, we'll sedate somebody to intubate them. But we might not have enough sedative to intubate people. And so you go from a situation which at best is unpleasant and life-saving, being on a machine helping you breathe with tubes stuck down your mouth, to all of a sudden it being tantamount to almost a torture where you have this thing stuck in your mouth and every aspect of your physiology wants it out because you are not sedated. So it is not just only the lack of respiratory equipment that can cause problems, but also the medications that go along with it. And additionally compounding the problem is personal protection equipment for healthcare workers. We have gone through, we had a 6-month supply. I think in Washington, we had a 6-month backup. We are already through over 5 months of that. Now, we do have new stuff coming in. But so we've gone through some of our essential supplies very quickly, and we don't know when we will be able to restock. So in terms of shifting the curve, all of our energy should be, especially as young, healthy people, should be focused on not placing a burden on the existing infrastructure so that we can maximize its use. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking. I hope this is interesting for you.
That's fine, because it also brings up another point that it has been mentioned, but not as much, and that's this medicine insecurity that we live in right now.
Oh yeah.
While America allowed a lot of industries,
I think we're going to be addressing this in the future, but so many of our medications are now made in China. And it's very conceivable that a country with a shortage will limit exports. So we might even be at a situation where China has medicines, but they might not even be sharing because they have to prioritize for their own population. Also, shortage of antibiotics as the viral infection progresses and we get fluid in the lungs, you can get pneumonia to develop, which is a bacterial infection. And I do not know the status of our antibiotic supplies. That's not something I have any idea of. Hopefully we will be able to treat most cases in adequate time.
So let's talk a little bit about, as far as let's bring it back to cannabis, because there has been this narrative, and I don't know the research very well.
I'm sorry, this narrative of what, Alex?
And I don't know the research very well of cannabis oil or CBD oil being antimicrobial.
Well, we have to be so let me parse my words, and I want everybody to be super clear about this. When we say something is antibacterial, that means it works against bacteria. It may not work against all bacteria. It may work only against gram-negative or gram-positive bacteria, not the other. But it provides antibacterial support to a degree. When we say something is antiviral, there are so many different types of virus. So we cannot say specifically about the coronavirus or the COVID-19 is a more accurate description without any studies. So we have to be careful with our language there. That being said, there is one of the places that the virus attaches to our cells. Viruses actually need to, they're kind of like helicopters landing on a ship. They need a place to land. So these viruses need attachment points. One of the attachment points for the coronavirus is something called the angiotensin receptor. Just think of it as a big helicopter pad. We know that cannabinoids, including CBD, for example, inhibit attachment points for viruses in SARS, which is another respiratory syndrome, which also happens to be a coronavirus. So we know that, there's theoretical benefits there for another virus. We know that cannabinoids can immunoregulate. So, for example, we know that they can help regulate mast cells, which are largely responsible for inflammatory signaling in the lungs. We know that the cannabinoids are very helpful in inhibiting oxidative stress. Any of the inflammation that is going on can cause damage. The cannabinoids in general, not specifically for coronavirus, can help that. We know that the cannabinoids can shift metabolism into a repairing phase versus a building phase, and that the cannabinoids can also shift mitochondria to have improved energy production, and there's all studies on this. We know very specifics about cannabinoids blocking lung injury. There's something called a TLR4 receptor and an adenosine receptor. So cannabinoids can protect lungs, not with coronavirus, again, but in other circumstances. We know that cannabinoids can relax smooth muscles of the airways. So they may not be able to help the mucus, but they can open the airways to help get air in. We know that respiratory cells, the cells in our lungs that come under attack, cannabinoids can protect them against cell death. So all of this, Alex, that I'm talking about, even though we can't say specifically it works with coronavirus, has health benefits, has immune stabilizing benefits, and it all occurs without risk of toxicity or respiratory depression. And we also know that cannabinoids have been shown to protect against organ damage in conditions of reduced oxygen and blood flow, not only in the lungs, but also in the brain, in the kidneys, in the liver. I could go on and on. CBD has been shown to be antiviral in hepatitis C virus. It's antiviral in HIV, antiviral in Kaposi sarcoma virus. And we know that it treats symptoms following other papillomavirus vaccinations, for example. CBD has been proposed for a treatment of post-Ebola virus complications. And we know that we don't really see a lot of addictive potential to CBD-oriented cannabis strains, so I think that that's a benefit. And as you mentioned, furthermore, with respect to bacterial infections that will often follow a viral injury, an acute lung injury, CBD has really good antibacterial against gram-positive, which is important for those with a technical background, and has also been shown to reduce antibiotic resistance of gram-negative infections. So I, as a healthcare practitioner, have been in, how do I talk about this? Because they're saying we can't say it does anything for coronavirus because it hasn't been tested, but it has done all of these other things. So if I just for myself personally, if I look at the risk-benefit ratio between what are the potential benefits that I may receive versus one of the downsides, I would say that one of the major downsides of cannabis in the age of COVID-19 is to be careful with inhalation products, especially smoke products, because that could worsen things. But so many other areas point to broad benefits. And again, another monologue.
So, just so I understand it for me personally, so it's good to use cannabinoids in concert with other measures to keep myself healthy. We're not saying that
to maintain a healthy immune system, yes. To maintain good health, yes. To help get, also for any, it's very unsettling. So to maintain calmness amongst all of this chaos, to keep the mind calm, it can be good for that. To help get rest in a situation where there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I know we spoke before the recording, and I was very happy to hear that you and your family are safe and secure, and that it looks like you're going to be going to work in the near future, thank goodness. Imagine families who the primary breadwinner or all the breadwinner all of a sudden don't have this. no money coming in, and the kids are at home, and they need to eat, and it's a small place. So just to be able to handle all of that stress points me towards, I think, CBD and potentially CBG-oriented cannabis strains to maintain health, good positive attitude, strong functioning immune system, that type of thing.
Yeah, that is a good point. Something to remember that at its most basic, cannabinoids do help quiet the mind, and just help relaxation, anxiety, all those things.
And I think, and this is very personal opinion. Are we allowed to swear on your show, Alex?
Oh yeah, like sailors, brother. Go for it.
I think Americans are stressed as hell right now. Not to use an expletive, but we are effing stressed right now. And what do I know about myself when I am under extreme pressure? Guess what? Sometimes I don't make good decisions. Guess what? Sometimes I don't receive all the information because I'm not really listening because I got too much going on. So those are two classic mistakes that not only the U.S. made, but let's not forget that China made this as well. When it first came, everybody ignored it. You remember that doctor in China? The doctor in China was like, hey, we got a problem here in Wuhan. And they berated him, and they fined him, and they punished him. And that was the early Chinese response. Our response, too, was a type of denial because we got too much going on. It's almost like I can't handle the truth because I got so much stuff going on right now. I can't even look at this right now. So I'm not saying that I did this or that anyone is to blame, but that as a culture, we have made some decisions that might come back to bite us. And it's not because we're not smart and it's not because we're not good, but it's because we are stressed and we are overwhelmed, and our nervous systems and our thought processes are not ideal under those circumstances.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's how do you not feel the stress right now? That's the thing.
You're going to have stress right now. And again, I know it's a rhetorical question, but I say endocannabinoid system. It is one of the major stress relieving systems that our body has to relieve physiologic stress. And remember, one good definition of stress is any demand on the body to deal with change. And that can be physiologic change, it can be societal change, it could be mental, it could be emotional. So cannabinoids help us handle change better, both on a cellular level, on an organ system level, as a full and complete organism. And I think also as a culture, it can help us get some comfort, when we really need it at the end of the day or, whenever that may come.
So now, speaking of cannabis helping deal with changes, I want to switch topics here a little bit and talk about hyperemesis or extreme vomiting. A couple of different types. The first type I want to talk about is the type that women get during pregnancy. It's called hyperemesis gravidum. Okay, there you go. See, I would have butchered that completely. Now, this isn't just, and I've known a couple of women in my life that have had it. This isn't just your regular run-of-the-mill morning sickness. These women, when they have this, it is vomiting all through gestation, the 9 months, however long that is that woman takes, and several times a day.
It can be torturous. In terms of you, and so what is your question as far as that goes?
So there's a lot of different ways that women have dealt with this. One of them are natural ways, and a big benefit. I've read that some women use ginger. That really helps them. It's a natural way. Now, some pharmaceutical ways, there are pharmaceuticals, but I don't know any that are really designed for pregnancy. They're mostly designed for nausea and vomiting in general.
And because I don't work with that population group, I'm not up to speed on the latest of how it's managed. But my understanding is that with anti-nausea medication, for example, across the board, not just with pregnant or nursing women, but across the board, these pharmaceutical anti-nausea medications work better than cannabis for about 70% of the population. However, that leaves about 30% where the pharmaceuticals really don't do much at all. And that really becomes much more of a delicate clinical thing to consider, because you have to look at the ramifications of what harm is the vomiting causing in this population group, and you need to make it a clinical decision. And those are decisions that I don't make, but for any woman who is pregnant or breastfeeding, I always say that cannabis is a relative, if not an absolute, contraindication. And there are experts who are good at this. There is in San Diego, for anyone in California, because telemedicine's a thing now, Michelle Sexton, find to be very knowledgeable as a clinician in this area, because I don't prescribe cannabis for anyone who's pregnant or breastfeeding. That's just my policy. There are others who push that envelope, so that's why I'm giving these names. Jamie Caroon, also Dr. Caroon, also in San Diego area at the Center for Cannabinoid Research, and then in Washington State, Hatha Badao, and anyone who can either email me or you if they want an expert who can really talk to issues in and during pregnancy. And then in Santa Barbara area, David Bierman, medical doctor, his offices are in Goleta. He does not do telemedicine, but I think his office is still open. So for folks who want or need more information, I think that that's very important. I just always am very cautious with pregnancy and cannabis, because we need to know a lot more than we do now. So. And interestingly, women throughout the developing world use cannabis as an anti-nausea for pregnancy. I've seen, and I'm not an expert in the data, but I have seen a lot of the data. Esther Fried with the study in Jamaica, and then there is another study done with significant flaws that kind of cuts the other way. But one of the things that's very interesting in Jamaica, I find, is that we, at least the data that I've seen, we're not seeing developmental delays in any parameters, and in some parameters we're seeing actual benefits. Because if the mom is vomiting, the mom is not sleeping, and if the mom is not sleeping, it's hard to have a healthy pregnancy, and it's certainly hard to have a happy pregnancy. So,
well, it's also, if the mom's vomiting, I'm sure the baby isn't getting enough nutrients, because if the mom's not absorbing
well,
it,
I don't know that you can say that. The thing about the thing that's interesting is, for the most part, whenever there is pregnancy, the mom gives all the best of her nutrition to the baby, to the developing baby. For example, postpartum depression, which is a depression that happens after childbirth for a lot of women. A lot of people think that there might be an essential fatty acid deficiency, where during pregnancy the mom is not getting enough of the good fats, and she's giving, and the brain, remember, about a third of the brain is made up of these good fats. She's giving all of her good fats to the baby, and then when the baby is born, she's got nothing left for herself, for her own needs. And this is part of what contributes to that clinical depression postnatally. So I don't know that we can say if there is vomiting going on, the baby is not getting something. But I think that what we can say is that a distressed mom is hardly ever a good thing for a baby, and in many circumstances is less than ideal.
So, in the end, if you are a pregnant woman who's dealing with this, talk to
I
your
mentioned
doctor.
those other clinicians. There are resources out there. Also, CBD products they don't carry the stigma that THC has, and a lot of the developmental concerns are with THC, but CBD does have some anti-nausea properties. My feeling is that THC combined with CBD is best for nausea. And if I was just dealing with nausea, I think THC is better, but if you're pregnant, you might not want that. So there might be another option. And again, just as a caveat, even CBD products I consider to be very relatively contraindicated in pregnancy. Talk to an expert. You got to talk to an expert, not the because
internet.
I think, and most professionals will err on the side of caution and say not use it. But if you think that it really might be something that you want to explore, get some educated, licensed advice.
Yeah, don't just ask Uncle Google, please. Please. So now let's switch over to a different type of hyperemesis of extreme vomiting, and this is a cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome.
Yep.
And
yes. Now this one is interesting. Go ahead. I know you've been reading up on this, and
I keep coming back to it every. I know we spoke about it one time, probably about a year ago, and there really weren't that many cases back then. But as more countries and more states here in the U.S. started coming online with different kinds of cannabis legalization, a lot more people were finding or suffering from this, and we really don't know for sure what it really is. I mean, as far as like a definitive, this is what causes it. But a lot of people in the industry have really latched on to this idea that it could be caused by neem or azadirachtin poisoning. And I'm really not sure if that's the cause, because really CHS, cannabinoid hyperemesis, the syndrome, the main symptom is just a lot of vomiting. I mean, people do.
That's true. That's true. And I read the I think it was the Leafly article you sent me where they referenced the study to the guy who got sick from the neem oil, and the man who got sick in that peer-reviewed study, he consumed, I believe, 40 mLs or maybe it was 20 mLs milliliters of the liquid, of liquid neem oil, which is about the equivalent of like 6 tablespoons of neem oil. Now, here's my thought on that, Alex. We don't know that it's cannabis. You're correct. It could be an additive. However, I don't think it's neem oil, and here's why. When you have hyperemesis, you typically are looking at somebody who is using a lot of cannabinoids on a regular basis. So it could be a contaminant. And as you mentioned, one of the clinical features is this constant vomiting. However, the most important feature of this symptom clinically is that cannabinoid hyperemesis, the vomiting goes away when you get in a hot shower or a hot bath. I don't know if you're aware of that as a symptom. Is that something you were aware of?
Well, I was aware of that as a treatment for it, because that seems to be the only...
Yes, and that's also a diagnostic feature, so that when you have a patient who is, let's say he's a pain patient, legitimate pain patient, just had spinal fusion surgery on his back, and he's 28. We'll give him a good, strong, young age. And all of a sudden, he has been doing a lot of high-dose inhalation and oral products, including, lots of dabs. They get sick with the vomiting, and the bath makes them better, and they get out of the bath, and they vomit again. They take a hot shower, they stop. They get out. So with neem oil poisoning, with pesticide poisoning, you don't get that clinical feature. So with neem oil, that you are absolutely correct that neem oil poisoning symptoms to a large degree mimic hyperemesis. However, one area where they do not match is this very interesting feature with hot baths stopping the vomiting. So that's why I think it is not neem oil. However, I do concede that it may not be cannabis. It could be another additive. We need more tests to find out. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's all I have on this. So I don't know that much more about this.
I mean, here are some of the realities of it that I've read, anyways. Is okay. So the really big symptom from CHS is just the excessive vomiting. Now, people do complain of abdominal pain and muscle tension, but all that can be traced back to the vomiting, just the dehydration.
Okay.
You know,
Fair enough.
and
Fair
as
enough.
for, you know, as a diractin poison specifically, a hot shower relieving that poisoning isn't, like you were saying, isn't a treatment for it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the poisoning of azadirachtin, I mean, there are other symptoms besides just besides just a lot of vomiting.
Yeah.
You know, there's liver toxicity, you know, increased
Mm-hmm.
salivation, you know, convulsions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're not really seeing those symptoms with CHS. Now, it could
And
be.
usually with high dose cannabinoids, you see liver protection. I know there's some debate on the CBD line but hemp can cause liver damage. I dispute that to a degree, because usually those are ultra high doses in patients taking other medications, but that's a whole nother side story. So um,
Well, and we also have to remember that cannabis and cannabinoids are biphasic, which means that at a
yep.
low dose, it has one reaction, and then at a higher dose, it's going to have the opposite reaction.
Yes.
Okay, now at a lower dose.
Cannabinoids are multiphasic. That is absolutely right with the low dose versus the high dose. We also see the endocannabinoid system behaving differently when an organ system is sick versus when it's healthy. So that stimulating the endocannabinoid system of an organ that is ill is going to potentially have different effects than if that system is healthy. And the reason for that is because it is a health maintenance system. When a certain organ, cell, tissue, part of the body is unhealthy, by definition, the endocannabinoid system is not working optimally, and therefore is behaving differently. So it is what I love about the cannabinoid system. This system, even though is fully scientific, is really posing a number of conundrums for the modern physiologic model of how disease works. And I feel if we get through this coronavirus business, the future of 21st century medicine is going to be largely centered in and around this endocannabinoid system. And how does it protect our body from change of all kinds, physiologic change where I used to not have a virus, now I do. You know, how does it buffer us against those onslaughts? And I see that as its really good therapeutic availability, not just for us as individuals, but also for the whole culture and the whole planet.
So speaking of, excuse me, speaking of dealing with change and how cannabis can help, it's also very possible, getting back to CHS, is that, I mean, it's very possible that some of the people who suffer from CHS may have an actual, or may have developed an actual allergy to cannabinoids.
Yes, it certainly could be true, and I have done a number of consultations, and again, for me, these patients are mostly young, healthy men using large amounts, but this has rendered it nearly impossible for some of these people to use cannabis recreationally or medically. So,
correct, and I come back, and in my mind, I always come back to that biphasic part, because it's very possible that,
that's a good point, Alex.
You know, it's very possible that we've just overloaded our system with cannabinoids.
Yep.
And you know, the body has said, I've had enough, man. You need to cut down.
Yeah. Let's talk about receptors, because I know you have a very educated audience, and a cell receptor is something that sits on the outside of the cell, and it receives, that's why it's called a receptor, is because it receives biologic information from outside of the cell and uses it to make changes inside of the cell. If we look at the cannabinoid receptor and receptor populations, when we have more antenna, when we have more receivers, we can bring in more information. When we don't have any antenna, we can't bring in as much information. So the number of cannabinoid receptors also affects how the endocannabinoid system works, and it varies wildly. So it is a very fuzzy system. But what we know is that if we use very low doses of THC, we get what's called receptor upregulation, which means more receptors, more information. So by using a tiny or a small or a micro dose of a THC product, you can actually get more endocannabinoid receptors, the body's internet, so to speak. The ECS is like the internet of the body. The body's information processing systems improve, especially with the receptors with the low doses. But when we use higher doses, those receptors will decrease and there will be less transfer. So
okay, hold on.
whisper dose,
Can I stop you?
low.
Let me stop you there for a minute, just so I understand it. Okay, so
Yeah.
at low doses, our body seems to make more receptors, the
Yes,
CB1 or the CB2
it's an
receptors.
upregulation.
Okay.
We upregulate the cannabinoid receptors. That's correct.
Okay, so on that note, I've just got just one question. So, you know how sometimes when you meet those people or you hang out with those people who've never tried cannabis before and then they try it with you and they say they don't feel anything? Is
Yep.
that because they have a low receptor count and they're really not feeling?
This is true. Many people,
And that's a
who have
complete
never
tangent.
tried
You know?
marijuana before can use it, hopefully, in an attempt to be recreational and get high. They can use it, and the first time they try, they get no effect. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3, sometimes 4 or more times. So what is going on, we think, with those people is that there is some change happening in the receptor dynamics of the system, that all of a sudden that part of it wakes up. And that is a very real phenomenon. Many people, when they try cannabis for the first time, think, this doesn't work, or what's the big fuss?
Yeah, you always run into some of those.
I always tell patients, if you've never used cannabis before, when you get high for the first time, you will know. It's not going to be any question in your mind. But if they're not, and this is something that we need to let folks know who are beginners, because if they try, let's say they try 10 milligram edible to no effect whatsoever, the next day they might feel they want a 20, when in reality they should be staying with the lower dose a lot of the time.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, I've always wondered about that, and I wanted to ask you about that whole receptor count.
Yep. And if you think also, there's something called, when you use a small amount of it and you upregulate the receptors, you actually might even be able to use even less the next time as opposed to more. So you're expanding the therapeutic window with low doses and you narrowing it with higher doses.
So let me take you back to that upregulating the receptors. Okay, so now you said that at low dosage, we're going to create more receptors. At higher doses, we're going to actually take away receptors. So now that's something we think is happening with CHS, is that as we use higher dosage, our receptors are lowering. And once they get to a certain point, as far as the low receptor count, the body's like, that's it, I can't take it. And that's where the
I don't know
vomiting
that we
comes
can
up?
extrapolate that far, but yes, as the amounts increase, there is a threshold that is reached, and the system that appears to be breaking down is this vomiting system. And one of the ways that I think about vomiting, it's not an entirely accurate way, but vomiting is an irritation of the nervous system. So you get food poisoning and it gives you nausea. Well, the food you eat has food poisoning, bacteria, whatever, Campylobacter, whatever, dysentery, you name it. And it causes a reflex reaction that is not pleasant, but it is an irritation based. The nervous system has an irritability threshold. When that threshold is overloaded, you get this retching, right? It's an irritability factor. One way to think of it is that cannabinoids reduce the nervous system's irritability. It reduces its over-exaggeration to stimulus, so to speak. But with these abnormally high doses, we may be getting a signaling pattern that is the direct opposite of that, so that instead of calming the system, it actually makes it more irritable.
So the other part of this of CHS that I wanted to just pick your brain about is the industry side, because they've really held on or really, wanted to hang on to this idea that CHS is solely caused by some kind of insecticide poisoning, azadirachtin, or something else that's in neem oil. And that's because it seems like they don't really want to talk about the possibility that some people may be overloading their system, that cannabinoids can actually harm people.
I agree. I think a lot of people do.
I just think that they're more comfortable with it because they don't want to have that conversation, or they don't know how, or they feel like it's going to create a black eye. But I think it's something us in the industry really need to talk about and at least have some sort of idea of an answer, because it is going to come up.
This is great, Alex. Let's tie this into coronavirus. So it's kind of an abstract thing, but you don't remember, I don't remember because I wasn't there either. But Henry Ford invented the automobile in the early 1900s, right? Somewhere in and around 1920 or so, somebody got the idea of a revolutionary new design called a seatbelt, right?
Right.
Now, the auto industry said, we don't want people thinking cars are dangerous. We're not going to put seatbelts in, because if we do, people will think cars are dangerous and they're not going to want to buy cars. This is what happened.
That's a very good comparison. I never saw it that way.
We think that we have such a healing plant, and for me, I believe that we do. It's a healing plant not only for individuals, but for the nations as well. Healing. We don't like to think of it as a bad thing. But remember, there's a Greek doctor named Paracelsus, and he said, it is the dose that is the poison. It's the dose that's the poison. And the classic example of that is the rat poison Coumadin, which is now used in very low doses in humans to prevent blood clots. Why does it kill a rat? Because the rat, in a high enough dose, the rat can't keep its blood in its body, and it bleeds internally to death. At low doses, it just makes our platelets a little bit more slippery, so that as humans we have less a risk of stroke, heart disease, etc. So it is the dose that is the poison. Even water can be poisonous. If you drink too much of it, you can flush all of your electrolytes out and develop a heart arrhythmia. If you drink too much water, you can die. But water itself is not toxic. It is the dose that makes it so. And, we're a new industry. We want people to think cannabis is good and safe. The best way, so take this to COVID-19. The best way to make people safe is to have good information, good info. And you can get hyperemesis syndrome if you consume huge amounts all the time. However, if you're a normal patient, taking the least amount necessary for your given condition to achieve desired results, you are at an extremely low risk for the vomiting, unless you are using more and more doses. And if that's the case, if you are a patient, not a rec user, because there's a difference, but if you're a patient who feels that they're needing more and more of their cannabis to get the same effect, talk to your cannabis clinician and get some good advice, because there's so many ways to use this plant for healing. But even a good thing, too much of it can have a downside. It's just like anything. Massage, right? We think massage is good, but I'll bet if I said, Alex, we're going to have you need to do an 8-hour massage, receiving an 8-hour massage, at a certain point in time, you're going to get sick of it, So anyway, great question. Has that been helpful for you at all with
it does,
but process?
It does, and I think that's also a really good distinction to make, is that a daily user and a heavy user are two different things, though.
Very different. And also the heavy user typically, most of the time, not all the time, but heavy use typically self-limits. So, for example, there might be a lot of people using very heavily in their early and mid-20s. But you take that same person and you move them forward a decade into their 30s, and are they still using heavily? Many of them are no longer. Some of them are. Fast forward into your 40s. So that people who have used cannabis throughout a lifetime will tell you that they have gone through different phases. Some folks will say, at first I used cannabis spiritually because I was so interested in the different perspectives that the head high gave me. And it just was really very insightful. And I would love, 150 milligram brownies, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but they're in their 40s or 50s. And now they said, and now all I do is, I just want it when I get home from work, after we put the kids to bed, just sit down on the back porch and have a little puff and let the day go. They're not, so even within the same individual, use can change over time. But typically this hyperemesis is, talk to any emergency room clinician that you see, typically young folks who use a lot of cannabis most every day.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're finding as far as scientifically. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff. People like to, everyone's, especially if they're suffering from CHS, everybody just wants an answer.
Yes.
Hey, Dr. Jake, thanks for getting on the phone with me, man. I appreciate you talking to me and answering mostly my questions about coronavirus and how some CBD oil may help the regimen of keeping us all healthy.
Think of CBD as a immune system balancer. I don't like to think of it as good for anything in specific, but I like to think of it as good for a lot of things in general. So my pleasure, Alex. And I just like to say thanks again to your audience for listening, and thanks to you for doing this week after week after week. And you're really bringing a following along of folks and teaching them and educating them how to care for themselves. And really, that's what this is all about.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Is there a way, the audience can find you?
Yes. You can always find me at cannabismatrix.com. If you can't remember my name, just type in cannabismatrix.com. That takes you straight to my website. You can email me at my email address, drjake at drjakefelice.com. That's DRJAKE at DRJAKEFELICE.com. You can also just find me through Cannabis Matrix. I offer corporate education as well as a whole host of other services. And I love to talk and learn about cannabis, so would welcome anyone reaching out as a resource. My clinic is largely full, so I am not really taking new patients at this time, but I would still love to hear from folks.
All right. Well, thanks again, Doc. Do me a favor. Do not hang up. Everybody else, I'm going to play a little bit of music and I'll be right back. So I thought that was pretty awesome. That helped me understand a few things a little better, especially the whole receptor count. That was pretty awesome. Again, thank you to Dr. Jake Felice for taking the time to talk to us. And remember, if you have a question or a comment about this episode, you can leave an email that is inmygrow@gmail.com. Well, mis amigos, that's it, man. That's all I have to share with you today. Don't forget, if this show has given you value, if it's educated you or even given you a little escape from your day and, you think that's important and you find value in that, help support the show financially. All amounts are welcome. You can leave a donation over at patreon.com/inmygrow. You can go over to the website, inmygrow.com, click on the support the show tab and buy a t-shirt. You can also send a donation through PayPal, that is inmygrow@gmail.com. Or if you're going to shop on Amazon, click on the Amazon link in the show notes of this episode, because that just lets them know that we sent you and the show gets a commission and it doesn't cost you anything. And those funds help the show pay for different hosting fees, buy equipment, and just make it easier to put the show on altogether. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. I get it. Here's how you can help. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever. Hit subscribe. And then leave a review and a rating. And then go over to YouTube and search for In My Grow Show with Alex and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Then go over to inmygrow.com, subscribe to the website. And then after you do all that subscribing, do one more thing. Just tell 3 other people about the show. That's it. Really easy. And finally, I want to thank all the artists who let me use their music to put the show together. All right, everyone, like I said, I'm going to get on out of here. Do me a favor, stay healthy, check in on one another, okay? You know I love you all very much, and remember to always grow, learn, and teach.